Hi, I'm Faye Reineberg Holt, and here we are talking about the importance of setting in writing. So I look forward to sharing some ideas with you about the importance and use of setting and I think it really does reign. It controls so much in your writing. But if you want to write and submit something, maybe about 100 words, you're thinking about a story and a scene that you might create in the piece of writing that you're doing. The part you just looked at was a lovely possibility for a fantasy story. It was actually at an orchid show. Now, this is a great setting for an adventure story. Look at all this forest and all the difficulties that could happen as a result of the forest. So the setting does determine what could happen. If, for instance, you're writing something and you're saying it's on an island, it's not enough to say the story takes place on an island and convey that idea. What kind of an island is it? What does it look like? And who's there? Here we have people along the coastline, but if you were up in this rugged forest area, there might be nobody to help you. And there would be many, many problems and conflicts as a result of that. In films and some nonfiction, and certainly in writing, setting really does control so much in the story. This is Amsterdam, and here we have a very old church, which could be a historical story, but when we look at what's beside it, we see it's modern day Amsterdam. So again, it's not enough to name a city. Included in setting is time, old and new, culture, and what we would call status quo, how things are at the beginning of the story. In Amsterdam, everybody rides bikes and they have the right of way. So if you're a pedestrian, you need to get out of the way quite quickly, and that's part of the culture. This lady is at Heritage Park. She's working on a Mountie uniform, and again in movies, TVs, at heritage sites, but sometimes even in restaurants, the owner will want us to have a particular feel or sense in that scenario. And so people design the sets or design the costumes and make them fit, but we have only our words to work with. So we have to choose carefully and do some excellent description to make settings work. This young man is on the Silk Road in Central Asia. When I think of the Silk Road, I think of it historically, but clearly this is a modern young man. We can tell it from the way he's dressed, and he's in a bakery. So conveying a modern story in an ancient place is fine, or conveying an old story in a modern place is fine too. This town crier is on the Halifax dock, and the tourist industry there wants us to get the sense of early Halifax. But again, if we look around, we can see new buildings at the back and beside the man. And so you're going to select which of those to work with. In some complex stories, time switches back and forth. We have flashbacks and everything, but a good way to start is create the setting you need for that particular story. This individual is playing the part of military at Fort George in Ontario. This fort would be about the end of the 1700s, early 1800s, and everything is very authentic looking there. Though, of course, you could tell the story of the young man doing the reenacting too. At the bottom here, we have the musical ride, the Northwest Mounties or RCMP musical ride. But to have the time frame correct, you would not allow women to be entering the Mounties and riding on horses. That's very true of today, and recreations today of early Mountie scenarios might involve women. but in the early days, women were not in the forces. So again, do your research and find out what was really happening. This picture was taken out of an airplane over Dubai, and what a complex transportation system we see here, and very modern buildings too. They can be the story that you're writing, but you might also find some communities far off from this that have a very different cultural feel, and the images there would be very different. So you're going to select the proper place for the story you have to tell. I had the good fortune of touring a Lancaster bomber. These were used in the Second World War for bombing raids. What shocked me was how small the inside of that plane was, and there'd be a few people in it, not just the pilot, but somebody who was looking after the guns that they were shooting after dropping the bombs and so on. What I realized is I would be totally claustrophobic there, although I love flying. And so the setting itself can create emotional and mental challenges as well as the physical challenges. And all of that might be suitable for your story. This part of the Stephenson's house, which is Markerville, Alberta, shows you the importance of small things. Stephen Stephenson, very well-known Icelandic poet, came to Alberta very early on, and the house, or at least part of it that is illustrated now, was wallpapered with newspapers. It was being used as insulation. So we see how important different things are at certain times in history or in the modern day. We see the newspapers, but we also see the very basic utility items that someone might have in a kitchen at that time. The next picture is from about the 40s. It's a heritage picture again. And the radio was where the family gathered. They'd get their news, they'd get the music, they'd get plays. And what a different world from people going around with their cell phones and getting music and images on their phones. So you want to be true to the story that you're telling, whatever that time frame is. The dwelling here was not someplace an individual lived. It was a crafter's hut, and interesting again to go inside it. This was made with palm leaves, so there was no lighting a fire inside, no having candles, but it did indicate what dwellings might have been at one time, though of course much larger, and in this case just for a crafter to illustrate things. This other photo is a modern furniture store, and the modern furniture is so very different from early furniture. If you were doing science fiction or something set in a later time, what might the furniture be like, and how might that affect the people that are in your story? Animals are so important too, and the first elephant here is a sculpture of an elephant on a golf course. Why they wanted that, I have no idea, but it was a lovely sculpture. And the second one is the real elephant in its real world, which would have all kinds of complications. Were there poachers? Did it become a frightening scenario? So you can use the real world, or you can create a world that you want, put sculptures, put images there, so that your story does make some kind of sense. And even cartoon characters live in a type of world. So consider that if you're doing something with cartoons. The bison or buffalo here would be logical in Waterton Park or in the early days, but you wouldn't see one on either coast of Canada, and you could include it in some kind of historical flashback or some other unique plot, but you have to decide if your story is going to be realistic or is going to incorporate some things that would not be true. Also consider what's under the water. Lots of people go to places and they will go diving or they'll do something without knowing what kind of fish or scary monsters or sharks are under the water, and that too could be part of a story. This bear was between Calgary and Banff, and anybody who's hiked will know that meeting a grizzly on a hiking trail would be one of the most scary things imaginable. So whatever's in the natural environment or the created environment can be part of the problems and the conflicts in the story that you are writing. We went to a Seattle Seahawks game and the crowds were fascinating. Here, there'd be a million stories amongst all these people. Now, there could be rabble-rousers, there could be dedicated fans, there were certainly fans dressed in strange fashions. All of that might be part of a story too. The sports events, people attending sports events, whether you're talking about the athletes or talking about yourself in sports, you can create that kind of world for your story too. But again, you want to make it suitable for the story you want to tell, for the characters, the plot, all those things that are going to matter in that story. I love the mountains. This is a book I wrote. There are so many stories of first ascents and tragedies and all kinds of things. So the mountains are a wonderful setting. My friend wrote this other book, which is about aviation tragedies when planes came down and there was nobody to save them and help. So the worlds you can create, you can research them on the net, or maybe you have some experience with them. They're all important to stories. You might want to write something that's 100 words, 150 words, and send it to the address here. If you do so by July 8th, I might be able to give you some feedback next time around on July 16th, or you can just do it for fun too. But on July 16th, I will be offering a bit more about setting and how important it is. So thanks very much for being with me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.